5G is the loftiest description of a technology to be delivered to the general public than we've had in a long time, right? 5G is about zero latency and continuous coverage all the time. And for those of us that build and own networks, and for everybody that like you that wonder why you drop calls all the time, that's a lofty goal.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmidt, also known as Mr. IoT. I am the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, I'm talking with Gary Jabara, the CEO and founder of Mobility. And I thought we were going to talk about 5G. Gary, welcome to the show. And first of all, did I pronounce your company's name right?
No, you didn't, but that's okay. Everybody mispronounces it, but you only mispronounce it once. It's Mobility.
Oh, okay. I had a French tang on it. Mobility. I'm sorry.
No,
Mobility.
okay. Actually, I'll float that to the rest of the staff. We might actually change it. It's got a little bit more flair for us, so we might go in your direction more than ours.
So, Gary, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
The title of the show is 5G and IoT. Tell us a little bit what you do at Mobility and why you founded it, and then we can dive into 5G, which is sort of like the hip word to talk about. And it's going to be all over CES and all those good things.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Super excited. IoT is a great, exciting space. We deal with those. We deal with everything IoT, whether we like it or not, every day. Mobility, we've been around for about 14 years, 13 years. I was a former Deloitte partner. I spent my career at Deloitte in the wireless space. I spent my life there dealing with networks in the RAN space and whatnot. So Mobility really is an extension of my career at Deloitte, right? We took all of our work that we did strategy-wise with the carriers in their RAN, and we built a firm around it. So now we own networks, right? We own a lot of towers. We own a lot of DAS networks. We do an inordinate amount of indoor stuff, stadiums, concert venues, in building. We own the largest contiguous Wi-Fi network in the world. We run and manage about 70,000 hotel rooms in Las Vegas and all the casinos and hotels on one network. And we try and stay on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge, although we bleed regularly when it comes to the RAN and connectivity and whatnot. But everything that we do is driving us into the IoT space, and so it's a great time to be in wireless, as we say, right? We're a firm of first. It's a great time to be out in front.
So I heard you say you do all kind of networks. You're not really limited to cell networks or Wi-Fi. You run Wi-Fi networks, you run cell networks, you run towers. All of it? That's very unique.
Yeah. Well, we own them, and so we run them, and we manage them, and we knock them, if you will, with our network ops center. And that's the ecosystem of wireless, right? I mean, when I started back with AT&T and Craig McCaw, we were putting up towers that were 200 and 300 feet tall, big boomers we used to call them. And then we migrated from that to smaller towers, and then, as you know, the industry migrated from that to smaller RAN components, right? So everybody started to go to smaller towers, and then outdoor DAS, and then indoor DAS and small cells, and and God knows what, the form factor and technology is growing, exponentially faster than we can deploy networks. So things are getting smaller, and next step is a 5G IoT. So we've been through that spectrum over the last, I've been through that spectrum over the last 30 years, and the firm's been through it obviously over the last 15 years.
So I have to say, I'm kind of, I want to go to 5G, but I have to ask this question. To this day, I find I drop calls when I switch from cell to Wi-Fi to cell. It's still not quite for me as a user, quite transparent. What do we need to do?
I always tell everybody, in this world of, self-driving cars and automated things and whatnot, I always tell everybody, never let go of the wheel. because, connectivity isn't what everybody thinks it is, right? And, 5G is this nebulous standard that everybody's come up with that's supposed to be zero latency, everybody connected all the time. And, the issue that you just raised in dropping a call and switching from technologies and even dropping calls around town, it's a fact of life. Demand at the handset is accelerating the ability for everybody to invest in networks. And so, we always think that things aren't going to get much better, much faster. In certain areas, they'll get much faster, than they are, and they'll get cleaner than they are. But, you'll always have those situations where you'll drop things. So never let go of the wheel.
Okay, I'll take that. I don't have a Tesla yet, so it's okay that way. My car, I still have to steer myself anyhow.
Good boy.
Yeah, I actually miss it. I lived on a boat for a while. I sailed, and it was kind of nice when for hours the autopilot was driving, but there were no cars around me either.
Right.
So let's switch to 5G. What is 5G? Why is it such a big deal? Why do so many people talk about it? And when am I gonna have it? I know you probably already have it, but when am I gonna have 5G for real?
Well, 5G, let's talk about what 5G is and why everybody's talking about it, right? Everybody's talking about it just like we used to talk about 3G. And everybody's talking about it just like we used to talk about 4G. And now everybody's talking about 5G, like they talked about those, previous generations. 5G is different, though. 5G is the loftiest description of a technology to be delivered to the general public than we've had in a long time, right? 5G is about zero latency and, continuous coverage all the time. And for those of us that build and own networks, and for everybody that, like you, that wonder why you drop calls all the time, that's a lofty goal, right? And so it's exciting to the industry from a zero latency, speed, and connectivity perspective. The other thing that's exciting about 5G is it doesn't involve just the carrier community, right? 5G is different than a 3G or a 4G because it involves the appliance world, right? It involves people, different than the carriers, right? It involves every device manufacturer in the world. It's a personal generation of wireless. It involves the human, right, versus just the device, right? It involves everything in your life, your doorbell, your thermostat, your baby monitor, your company's kind of connectivity within the office, industry, right? So it's really an interesting generation that's taken us from just talking about an experience on the handset to an experience in your life. And so I think that's why 5G is something that everybody, to quote you, everybody is talking about, because it really involves everybody.
When am I going to have it?
It's going to be a journey. It's not something you're going to wake up one morning and say, wow, I've got 5G, right? You've already got it. So, but you've got a part of it, right? So I imagine there's something that you've got in your life that's connected, right? You've got something other than your phone that's connected. And this is kind of an interesting thing to remember in the wireless world. I remember way back when we were at about 60% absorption or 50% absorption, and all the people that used to research the wireless industry would say, hey, we're at about 60, 70% absorption, which meant 60 or 70% of people had cell phones, and there's only about 10 or 20% left, and then we're done. We don't have to build any more networks, right? And so now we're, at multiples of that because everybody's connected in so many different ways, right? You've got your laptop and your cell phone years ago. Now you've got your thermostat and your Ring and your Tile and your phone and your iPad and your TV and probably your dog. And so you've got a part of 5G already, whether you realize it or not, because it's migrating away from you personally to other things. But when you think about the goal of 5G, everything connected all the time with zero latency, that's a journey. But it's going to happen organically around you, and you're not really going to notice it. You'll take things for granted that you didn't take for granted last year. And then when you stop and think back, you'll think, wow, I am a little bit more connected than I was, right? Which creates convenience for your life. It also creates other issues and problems, but it'll be a journey. We'll get there. I don't know when we'll get there, but we'll get there.
So you're saying I'm already having part of 5G because I have so many things connected. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you do.
It's interesting when you and I got connected through the Zigbee Alliance, and we facilitate part of that meeting. And as the beginning icebreaker, I asked people how many connected devices they have. And so I thought, when I asked the question, I need to answer that for myself. And I realized it's actually not an easy question to answer. It's not like one place I can go to. I really had to sit there and think, my computer, and then you start going through your home devices, you kind of forget. You said the dog. My dog runs around with the little thing on the collar, right? So, and you don't think of those things. And I ended up with over 40 devices that I actually have in some form of fashion connected. So
and so people are connected. We're living in we're starting that 5G journey, right? And we're taking a lot of things with us. And so so it's coming, right? It's here and it's coming. It's a journey. It's going to be a long journey, a longer journey, I think, than any other wireless generation, any technological generation, because it's a little bit more complex and the investment's going to be exponentially larger. But it's going to be a great journey.
I'm curious. You started out saying something about the good and the not so good about all things connected. Tell me about where do you see things going, from here? What is that 5G gonna mean for us? What are the developments we're gonna see in how we interact with things and changes, not on the network level, but in a day-to-day life basis? I mean, I'm gonna just point out one of the things on your website. You talk about the LA Galaxy stadium that you've worked on, and there's just some really interesting things that we don't even think about anymore, yet it's so connected.
So, I think the question there is, as we talk about things being, easier and more interesting as we become more connected, there also becomes challenges, right? Mm-hmm. When you talk about a stadium or you talk about an event or a venue, right? And we do more venues in the United States than anybody in the country. They're really interesting environments, right? You have thousands and thousands of people gathered all at the same time. And so you have not just the delivery of information to those folks that they need now and they expect now, but the uplink for those folks and being able to be social is a huge burden, and it's a technological challenge on, for all the carriers, for everybody to be able to do those kinds of things. But if you think about the way the stadium is being run, and you think about all of the ticket venues ordering, you have companies like Appetize right now, which are leading the way and changing the business model of ordering your food at your seat or pre-ordering your food at the venue. And then you have the management systems, and you have ticket scanning. If you go to LAFC in LA, they don't even have paper tickets. Everything has to be digital. And there's stadiums across the country that are all around the world that are migrating to just total digital. It's a complex set of network protocol. You have licensed and unlicensed. You have the collision of licensed and unlicensed. You have the collision of handsets that we trust. And then you have peripheral devices that we may not trust, or maybe we shouldn't trust. And then you have, safe, licensed kind of, uplink, downlink. And then you have unlicensed, wild, wild west uplink, downlink, right? So you have in that charge for experience and total connectivity, which is a great experience. There's all sorts of security challenges and penetration opportunities and whatnot throughout that entire network experience. So while you have the business folks running to try and run their business, and you have the network folks trying to provide an experience, there's an interesting dynamic happening with thousands of connections and thousands of openings in the network for challenges and problems and whatnot. So as we get better and more kind of connected, we're creating opportunities for things to also potentially go wrong.
So when I talk about this, one of the thoughts that come to my mind is when you're at a venue, one of the things that changes too is, we've had the longest time a handful of networks being able to, and at the end, it's typically one or two networks that broadcasts the event. And now with Facebook Live and all YouTube Live, all those, it's become actually a combination of here's the network where I get to see the players big, but then I have all the feeds from other people. How does that impact the network, and what do you do around this, and what are your thoughts?
It's a really good question. Typically as the network guys, we're not faced with questions like that. That's kind of a user question. So that's a really good question. I can answer it personally, and maybe that's the best way to answer it. When I go to the arenas where we have networks, they better work, right? They better work really well, right? And sometimes they're not as fast as I'd like them to be, right? So I'm always kind of texting people and saying, hey, what's happening on this sector? And, doing my speed tests and those kinds of things. But I do exactly what you just mentioned, right? I'll actually, broadcast live occasionally to my kids if I'm somewhere. And while I'm at the game, I'll get the game feed on my phone. So I get a better play-by-play, right? And watch a better play-by-play. So, just those abilities for me as a person, and I imagine everybody else in the stadium, create some really crazy network demands and broadcast challenges.
I guess maybe I'll ask it differently, or maybe it's the same question but in a different angle. Do you have requirements, let's call it neutrally requirements, to actually limit certain live feeds from users because of overruling licensing requirements by large networks?
No. I mean, our job as a network provider is to provide, connectivity as fast and as connected as we possibly can. And so certainly from a license perspective, it's about uptime all the time, right? And then from a unlicensed Wi-Fi perspective, I don't know a single instance where we block anybody, right? And I don't know a single instance really where the venue owners throttling networks or throttling content, right? It's really about user experience, right? If you talk about the venues and the venue owners, they're all about user experience, right? They want to have the best user experience on the planet. They want to have the better user experience at the Galaxy Stadium than they do at the LAFC Stadium, right? And I mean, Galaxy needs a far better team. But if they can fix the team, that's one thing. But they really do strive to have a better user experience, digital experience within the stadium than the next guys. It's become really, really important. And the same with buildings, right? Building owners, tenants are now becoming tenants of buildings and setting a mandate about what type of coverage, both licensed and unlicensed, they have in a building up on the 50th floor, right? Who would have known? And so that's becoming critically important now as well.
It's just a personal story. It's interesting. I happened to be in Maui when Jaws was cooking a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if you saw this, but there were 40-foot waves. And so if there's a dirt walk down. It's like an hour walk on a dirt road. And I carried my drone with me because I wanted to take video, and I have this little drone I fly. I'm a geek, as I said before. And I get there, and there's a huge helicopter right up there close taking video. And I was told actually that drones aren't allowed. And I was kind of like, darn, I wanted to have my little own footage. And it's a whole different issue, right? When you have a bunch of drones flying around with helicopters, what do you do? How do you control? But I heard actually that the big helicopter wiped out a drone. So there was a whole sort of like thing going on about this. And I just had to think of this when we talked about the big name.
Right. Sounds like you need a bigger drone.
No, I don't think I need maybe I could be in the helicopter, but I can't. So
that's a big drone. Yeah.
That's a big drone. Very true, very true. So Gary, I'm kind of curious, for someone that runs networks for a living, what do you do at home? What's your home like? Are you as techie at home? Do you have like the fastest home in the neighborhood? What's your personal networking life like?
My son and I kind of laugh sometimes because we wonder if the neighbor's hair is standing up straight because our house is pretty hot. our house is really hot. So yeah, we do a lot of, I also have a drone, by the way, so I'm a techie guy as well. I think that's the de facto, right? The one that everybody likes these days. I really like that one. But our house is pretty hot. You know, we have, I have several devices. I have, you know, all 4 carriers. And so we have, you know, small cells and magic boxes and signal extenders throughout the house. And, you know, from an unlicensed perspective, we run a pretty hot Wi-Fi, network. And so, you know, my son's a techie guy, so he's always testing things. And, you know, I always remind him, please don't hack the neighbors' networks. You know, you can just use ours, you'll be fine. And he actually, when we just moved into a new place, and he actually, I shouldn't probably say this, but he used it. I won't say which one, but he used one of the neighbors' Wi-Fi networks to sign us up for ours before we were live. So, so we're a techie house, and you know it's a hot house, and yeah, we enjoy that stuff.
So, what are you looking forward to the most? Looking forward a year or two? What's the thing that you kind of itching for to come?
That's a great question. I'm not a big fan of self-service, right? I kind of miss, I always use the analogy, I miss the old gas stations where when I was a kid, you know, we'd drive into the gas station and the kids would walk up to the car and they'd fill it up for you, and I can still smell gasoline, you know. And then they'd spray some blue stuff on the windshield. I never really knew what it was, but they'd wash the windshield. It was probably just water with blue food coloring, so we felt like we were getting our money's worth. But, you know, things have changed to self-service, right? You know, our HR systems at work, you got to go in and fill out your own stuff. You've got to sign yourself up for stuff. I mean, there's a lot of technology has enabled platforms that enable people to do things themselves. And I'm not a big fan of that. And so I really look forward to a migration, especially in 5G, of less self-service, of more full service. In other words, a better authentication experience with everything. So you don't really have to sign up to networks. You don't have to like go on and put your password in and go sign on to the network at the airport. You got to sign on somewhere at home, and sometimes you drop from the house and your Sonos doesn't work. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of self-service, right? And so I do hope a year or two from now, there'll be a real migration to some common keys, right? Where everything based on your appliance, everything will know you're there and everything will authenticate, and you really won't have to do much, right? It'll be a far more seamless experience. Because to me, being as techie as we are around our house, and certainly the company, you know, there's an inordinate amount of sign on, sign off, sign up, sign in, you know, even the webcast today, right? I mean, these types of things where everybody has to kind of take the time and the effort to get on board, right? At the airport, wherever. I think, you know, if we can migrate to a more full service connection experience, I think that would be super cool.
I love that. That's a great sort of point to close at. Something more secure and seamless at the same time. I love that.
Yeah.
With that, I want to say, Gary, thank you so much for joining. Our coffee chat, unfortunately, is coming to a close.
That was great.
If you want to join again, we are actually going on vacation now for a week, all of us, so no show next week, but we'll be back in the new year. And if you missed any part of today's awesome conversation with Gary, please check out my YouTube channel, and you'll also be able to see all our past shows. And with that, I'm going to say, Gary, thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays to you too. We'll talk again. Peace. See you later.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.